School of Public Health, MAHE Manipal. I extend you all a warm welcome to this international webinar. I request all the participants to be on mute other than the resource persons uh, during their presentation. So if there are any queries, only then you can unmute yourself and ask your queries. So till then, please mute yourself so that we can avoid disturbances. First and foremost, I would like to invite Dr. Asha Kamath to welcome the participants as well as the resource persons to this webinar. Dr. Asha is the head Department of Data Science, Prasanna School of Public Health, MAHE Manipal. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ashma. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this e-meeting. Today is the third World Statistics Day, and it's being designated with the theme of connecting the world with the data we can trust. And the focus is more on, importance of trust, authentic data, innovation, and the public good in the national statistics systems. However, most of us who are in the background of statistics and are working in different systems also are equally responsible to connect the world with data that can be trusted. And I take this opportunity to welcome all the resource persons, because what we have attempted in this meeting is that we are connecting industry and academia. So we have invited 3 of the speakers from academia and 3 from industry. And the people from industry, a couple of them also have the experience of academia. So we have with us in the morning session, Professor Anil Gore, who was a professor for a very long period of more than 3 decades with the University of Pune, Department of Statistics, following which he has been connecting himself with CITL in Pune. The second speaker of the day is Anup Diwanji, who is well known for his work in competing risk and survival models. And the third speaker is Mahesh Vishwanath Iyer, who is the co-founder of Sineflex Solutions, having his a stint of over a decade or so with the Novartis in Hyderabad. And in the afternoon, we have Professor R.P. Suresh, who is presently with the Accenture. We have Vikas from the Central University of Rajasthan, and Professor Ashwini Mathur from Novartis, Dublin. So this is the panel of speakers that we have for the sessions, deliberations of this day. And to give you a brief of, we had 470 plus registrations, but let's see how many actually joined the show. And representations are from close to 150 institutions. Some of the national institutions like AIMS, Aligarh Muslim University, BHU, ICMR, QSAT, industries like Infosys, then the technical institute like VIT. We also have some international registrations, probably for the international speakers. They might join when the speaker is coming in. So we have from Benisiut University, Brownett University, Google, Novartis, University College Dublin, and so on. So hope that all of you will have a good interaction with the speakers, and most of the speakers have a rich experience with them, both in academia as well as either in industry or consultancies. So I think we should be making the best use of this, and as we move on, we will see how we have to be responsible enough in playing around with data so that we are able to provide adequate enough evidences to the betterment of the public. So I welcome all the resource people for this particular gathering. Some of them will join a little later. And I welcome all the registrants for this particular webinar on the International, the World Statistics Day. I hope you enjoy the talks throughout and make it more interactive. So, and I welcome all my colleagues and students, some of whom will be also joining on the YouTube because we have kept a stream for YouTube, so we may not see the list of all the attendees here. So welcome to one and all. And yes, enjoy the deliberations. Over to you, Ashma.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Dr. Srimati Maya, who is the professor in the Department of Data Science, PSPH, MAHE, Manipal, who has served MAHE for the past more than 30 years, to chair the sessions, the forenoon sessions of this international webinar. Over to you, Dr. Maya.
Very good morning to all of you. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Anil Gore. Professor Anil Gore is a PhD in statistics from University of Kentucky, USA, and is currently a consultant statistician at CITA. He has a long experience as an academician in various universities in India, US, Canada, and Malaysia. He has published over 80 articles and 4 books on applied statistics. He retired as the HOD of Statistics, Pune University in 2007 after 28 years of service to the department. He was the principal statistician and vice president of the Statistical Services, CITL Statistical Software and Services Private Limited till 2019. He is a fellow of Indian Academy of Science, former member of the National Statistical Commission, former member of the National Tiger Conservation Authority, and current member of the R.A. Machlekar Committee for Evaluation of Indian Statistical Institute. It is indeed our pleasure and honor that he is with us today in this webinar and delivering a talk titled, Can Data Science Tackle Delays in Indian Judiciary? An interesting topic. I invite Professor Anil Gore to take over. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Maya. I want to share my slides, so let me try to use that facility. And
Anil sir?
Yes.
This is Himanshu sir. Can we record this session, sir?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Please do.
Yes.
And kindly tell me when you see the slides. Are my slides?
Not yet, sir.
Not yet. Okay. So let me welcome the audience. Good morning to everybody. I'm very happy to join this one-day conference on a topic which is dear to my heart, because all my life I have been working on this mission of using statistics for the betterment of society. And I want to begin by thanking the Manipal Institute for this opportunity, because with this new technology, I'm able to reach out to people who probably I would never have met in my normal professional life. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So my name is Anil Gore, and I'm associated with this statistical software and services company called CITL in Pune. It's a great pleasure to be a participant in the celebration of World Statistics Day on this 20th of October. And here is my email address. So Himanshu, is my slide visible now?
Not yet,
No,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So if there is something I can do, please do tell me.
Sir, if you can share your screen.
Yes, I thought I already shared it, but let me repeat that process.
Yes, sir. Yes, your screen is visible, sir. You can open your presentation now.
Okay. So the title is Can Data Science Tackle Delays in Indian Judiciary? One of my concerns, or you can say obsession, is selecting a problem which is important. And this problem of delays in Indian judiciary is important for India by any measure that you can think of. So let me move on to the next slide. All right. So let me start by stating the theme of this talk. The theme is the following. I believe that students and teachers of data science can gain immensely by taking up projects that benefit society. Okay, you try to do social work. In the process, you gain much more than what you would gain without doing it. If you work on such projects, you become better scientists, you improve your job prospects. You know, I've been a recruiter for software companies for many years, and I know what impresses interviewers. So if you have experience of working on relevant problems, it really improves your job prospects. You get huge work satisfaction. There is no two about that. You become socially relevant. In fact, your personality also changes. Our ancient sages, when they composed hymns or aratis or prarthanas or stutis for the gods, they always included at the end a portion which was called Falashruti. So if you did all this for this god, you will get a lot of things. So if you are a student and if you do this, then you will learn better. If you are looking for money, you are looking for wealth, you will get wealth. If you are looking for progeny, a son, you will get that. And if you are a seeker of blessing of the Lord, you will get that too. So typically such expressions are included in traditional Hindu aratis or prarthanas. And I think this applies very well to the theme that I have, which is if you take up socially relevant projects, then you get all this. Now, the projects can be in any field, but today I'm going to talk about projects in the law field. India is a giant country. Everything is big in India, including the court system. So there are over 3,000 court campuses in the country. And one of the serious problems of our judicial system is chronic delay. Okay. I believe that we can reduce delay through imaginative data science AI projects in collaboration with lawyers and judges. Therefore, my suggestion to all data science departments is consider taking up this as one of your activities. Okay. How did I start thinking about this? And it all goes back to, so I tell all my students in applied statistics that when you select a problem, you must be able to establish that it is not a problem that comes out of your head, but comes out from the experts in that discipline. So now the problems in law, who is a better expert than the Chief Justice of India? So several months back, I was reading a newspaper and our current Chief Justice, Mr. Bobade, gave a lecture somewhere on January 12th. And he said, and I'm quoting, "We have a possibility of developing artificial intelligence for the court system." So he talked about artificial intelligence, not us. And what is the purpose of this? He said, for the purpose of ensuring that undue delay in justice is prevented. Okay. So he states that this is a problem. He thinks that AI may be a tool that helps. Excellent. So that satisfies my first requirement. It must be an important problem. It must be perceived as a problem by the people in that field. In fact, here we get one more step. He says artificial intelligence may be useful. Okay. So just a quick review of artificial intelligence in our life, we all know Google Translate. So it translates from one language to another. Here is a favorite tool, AI tool for me. It is called Deep Tag. You can look it up on Google. What does it do? It examines your face or a picture and grades it for flaws like acne and wrinkles. So this is a AI tool used by the cosmetic industry, and one of my consultancies is in the field of cosmetics. So you should look up Deep Tag. There is another one, Deep Tech, and Deep Tech is based, I think, in Pune, whereas Deep Tag is based in San Jose, California. And Deep Tech reads medical images and gives diagnosis. So now we are talking about remote medical services. So this is going to be an important part of that. What about the legal sphere? Are there AIs already working in the legal sphere? Well, definitely so in the Western world. So Compass is one AI tool. What does it do? It assesses the risk that a given accused will abscond and repeat offense if granted bail. See, giving a bail is a decision that the judge has to take, and Compass helps the judge by telling the judge what is the chance that the accused will run away if granted bail. Predpol is another AI tool, again developed in the United States, which predicts place, time, and crime type in a city. And police can use it for patrolling. So every day in the morning in a city which uses Predpol, they generate the output for today and distribute the assignment, because the Predpol tells you that this part of the city is likely to have this kind of a crime at this time of the day. So AI is everywhere in our life. And we have to think about its connection with Indian courts. So what is the crisis in Indian courts? Well, this is an old adage, justice delayed is justice denied. And the delay in Indian courts is unbelievable. I'm quoting from Hindu of February 2020. There are 60 lakh criminal cases pending for over 5 years. This is unbelievably bad. And this is only 25% of all criminal cases. Over 1 lakh civil cases are pending for 20 years or more. This is unbelievable, impossible. So both civil and criminal cases, lot of delay, and the delay is at all levels. In Supreme Court, there are 60,000 cases pending. In High Courts, there are 40 lakh cases pending. In lower courts, there are 3 crore cases pending. So that there is huge backlog, there is no dispute. Why? And we are taking a bird's eye view here, or I am just quoting from what people have written about this issue. So they say there is a shortage of judges. So by some reckoning, you need 50 judges per million population. Okay, and India has 17. So we need to triple our judge number. Our laws are unnecessarily complicated, too many exceptions and so forth. Too many appeals. Our government also routinely appeals whenever they get defeated in a court. There are unlimited adjournments. These are some issues where data science cannot help. Okay, these are issues which people in the legal field have to sort out by themselves. So we should know the limitations of our approach. Bar and Bench is name of a periodical in the legal sphere. Bar means lawyers and bench means judges. So that's it. That's the name. And it is available online. You can look it up. And I'm going to read these few lines. While most of the discourse on court capacity in India focuses on the inadequacy of judges, significant gains can be made by process improvement at the NCLT. NCLT means National Company Law Tribunal, one kind of court. Several scholars and policymakers have highlighted the need for a deeper focus on management. So we need to change not the laws, but the way we run the courts. That is what people are recognizing. And that is where data science, information technology, artificial intelligence can play a useful role. So this is the idea. Information technology can help in many ways. First, too much paper. You see, it is said that the High Court building in Bangalore, half of it is filled by records, files. Only half is used. This is ridiculous. So we should be switching from paper to e-record. There should be e-filing. Now we don't file papers to income tax. We don't file papers to GST. Similarly, in courts also it should be e-filing, and Supreme Court has started this. So in the latest figures say that from April to August 2020, how many months? Whatever, 3-4 months. About 6,000 cases are e-filed, and only about 600 cases are physical filing. So e-filing in Supreme Court is really progressing very well. Okay. There is endless delay in supply of certified copies of judgments and orders. So let us make them available on websites, can be done easily. Lawyers typically have many cases in their hands. Litigants may also have many cases. Judges certainly have lots and lots of cases. So they need to update the current situation of each case and upcoming timelines. There has to be video conferencing of hearings. And many of these things are already happening. Though there are problems, but we have started. What about private sector? Yes, private sector is also trying something. And I will refer you to a recent article in Economic Times. There is a version called ET Prime. And there are many startups. I will mention a couple. So there is this startup called Legal Mind. And I really recommend, they have a very nice website. You should see it. And what do? They have AI-powered case search. So when there is a new case, you want to look up the precedences, similar cases in history and so on. And they help you do that. And they in fact give trends and patterns in judgments using analytics, so which is statistical modeling. They can even rank lawyers by success rate. So all this is possible. Another thing, they are going to offer this service called summary of judgment. Judgments are often very, very long. As of September 11, which is the last time I checked, they only have a beta version, which means they're still testing their software. And I am proposing to the data science department that you can compete with this with very minimal resources. In fact, I'm going to try and get a law college in Pune to start a free summary service for legal profession. There is another startup called legality.com, and they help you in document handling, signing, stamping, etc. There is another one which helps internships for law students. So there are all kind of startups. Here is Legal Rasta Tech Private Limited. What does it do? It helps in compliance with government rules. There is Soft Draft. It helps in creating, managing, and review contracts. This is a big portion of commercial law, contracts. And we'll talk about contracts a bit later. There is this MyAdvo, and it helps you in RERA. What is RERA? A Real Estate Regulatory Authority. What is NCLT? National Company Law Tribunal. Mutual Consent Divorce, Trademark Registration, Check Bounce. So different people specialize. So there are private sector things. Why should academicians bother? Because there are deficiencies in private sector. Number one, they are all for profit. There is nothing wrong in making a profit, but it restricts you to certain kinds of activities. They are not worried about efficiency of the court system directly. Okay. Therefore, they are not necessarily useful for clearing backlog. That is the problem with them. What I have in mind is that data science department should launch activities which will be non-profit and which will help in reducing the backlog. Here is another topic which is a major one in its own right and one about which I know very little, but I know that it is very relevant. What is alternative dispute resolution? Let's talk about it. So if you don't want to suffer delays in court, then there is one way. What is it? Don't go to the court. Then how do you resolve your disputes? You have something called the alternative dispute resolution or online dispute resolution. Okay. We have alternative dispute resolution in our country. It is called arbitration. But when I talk to arbitrating people, lawyers, they say it is as slow and as cumbersome as normal. So it is not working. There are many reasons. One of them is we always have these peculiar rules. For example, appointing an arbitrator is now the job of only high court judges. I don't know why. But there are online tools. Okay. These tools are fast. They can work 24/7. One example, not relevant to us, but you should know. We all know about eBay. This is the precursor of online buying of things. Online retail. Okay. They have an estimated 60 million disputes per year. And they cannot afford to have delays because people will stop trading with them. Admittedly, their disputes are very simple. Item not received, item not as described, and very simple, even there. Such ideas we can use for simple problems in our court system. They have a system which checks facts. It suggests both parties a solution. If not solved in 3 days, their system is refund the money, forget it. Pendency is more serious to them. Okay, so they have developed this method. We also have Indian online dispute resolution startups. One is called Nest Away Technologies, and it is about renting places. What disputes? Rent not paid. CADRE, or Center for Alternate Dispute Resolution Excellence. Center for Online Dispute Resolution. I assure you that though they are on the web, they are not widely known, not even among legal practitioners, not even among practitioners of alternative dispute resolution. I have talked to arbitration lawyers. They don't know about this. In fact, when I gave a similar lecture somewhere else, a lawyer came to me and said, help me. I want to learn this. I want to use this facility. And I said, I'm sorry, Baba. When I say this, I don't mean I'm an expert here. I'm just giving an awareness lecture. Somebody will have to take up the task of finding out how they operate and learn how to operate and so on. So I am suggesting this as a project to you, data science students and teachers. Learn to use one platform. Start a training program for lawyers because it is essential, I assure you. And in fact, you can start a private court. This is acceptable to our court system, mind you. And in fact, they will be grateful if a lot of people are able to sort out their disputes in your private court based on this platform. Everybody will be happy. I want to mention an NGO in Delhi. It is called Vidhi, vidhilegalpolicy.com or whatever, org. You should look up. They have a fantastic website. They have a fantastic history. And I am borrowing one of the short forms that they have used. They call it Jaldi. Justice, access, and lowering delays in India. Wonderful, Jaldi. So we'll talk about Jaldi here. Little drops of water, little grains of sand, make the mighty ocean and the pleasant land. I'm quoting this verse because I'm sure you, like me, would feel, what can I do to this great giant system of 3,200 courts and lakhs of lawyers and millions of clients? All big things start with a single step, okay? All big things start with, so never hesitate to make a small start. I'm also thinking about making a small start. Offer lawyers a simple summary service, okay? So my approach is keep it simple and stupid. I don't want to think about High Court and Supreme Court. I want to think about district courts and lower courts. People call this a worm's eye view. We had a bird's eye view about the whole system. Now we want to see what goes wrong in a lower level court, and that's where we want to intervene. This is my philosophy. And therefore I am going to propose several simple projects and simple initiatives which will be helpful, maybe not in Supreme Court. In fact, they don't probably need us, but certainly in lower courts. So I am suggesting that data science teachers and students can think of themselves as angels of change, okay? Here is the first, very, very simple project. A lot of time in a court is spent in dictating. So the judge dictates and a clerk types. Many things, of course the judgment, but even there is a diary called Roznama. Whatever happened in a particular case today is recorded. He dictates, somebody types. Takes a long time of the judge. What am I proposing? Let us eliminate typing. Then what do? You use voice to text software. Okay. You will have to train the court staff. Please recognize, you may be savvy, tech savvy, but the court staff are not. They are apprehensive of new things. Old dogs don't like to learn new tricks. So we have to be very user friendly. We have to be very helpful, hold their hand, teach them how to do. Also, these softwares are not like, buying a bottle of Coca-Cola and open it and drink. There is a lot of getting used to the software. There are adjustments to your accent, to your way of speaking. There is some editing needed. So don't think it is trivial. If you can get hold of some friendly court staff, see, they have to do it anyway. They have to spend a lot of effort. There is no law, there is no requirement, nothing needs to be changed. They just have to learn from you how to do it and then use their they have laptops and tabletops and smartphones. So it is all possible. But there is the last mile problem. It is possible, doesn't happen. Why? Something is missing in the end. Okay? You can solve that last mile problem. There is another possibility. In a typical, I talk to some district judges, So he says in a particular working day, you start with many cases listed, let's say 50. Most of them are adjourned, okay, and only a few are heard. So this is a waste of judge's time. What happens? This adjournment procedure is what the judge handles. He does not have to, because you can automate it, at least in some cases. See, for example, if there are 5 accused and only 3 have come, then there is no hearing on that day. Why do you need a judge for that? Even a clerk can do it. In fact, your machine can do it. Now you have biometric attendance. So I am suggesting let us introduce automation so that for simple reasons, if there is going to be adjournment, the judge does not come into the picture. Of course, you will have to give alternate date and that the judge will have to decide. But otherwise, the judge's time will be saved. Now you will ask, how much time is it? I was told 5 to 10% of each working day of a judge is spent in just sorting out which cases are going to be heard today. If we can automate that, that's 5 to 10% time saved. Here is another opportunity. We need a law document translation system, which will facilitate quality translation with speed and improve efficiency. Okay, what translation? Oh, we have multiple languages. Many courts operate in English. Many clients want procedures in their own language. So there is translation. Judgments have to be translated. Documents have to be translated. You can use Google Translate. It's a very powerful program. But now there is a software called SUVAS. I did not know about it. I just came to know this year. Supreme Court Vidhik Anuvad software. Okay, it translates judgments from English to Indian language. Excellent. Good for our people. What is the proposal I have? Students of data science should take up study of this software. Compare this software with Google Translate and come up with ideas for improving the software. Okay. Now in the computer science field, there is this subfield called natural language processing. And there is the NLP toolkit. And most of the work is done in Python. So I hear that almost every good department now has Python training. Okay. So we need summarizing legal documents. It may be judgments, contracts, they are long documents, reduce them to something reasonable. Even if you do it just for judges, their time in reading long documents will be saved. The logic of the program is very simple. You have to write the code in Python, but code is available on the web. In fact, programs are also available on the web, but you don't want to use programs which are based on servers abroad, because everything that you do there, they will transfer the data to the other country. So the country of origin problems you may be hearing now. So we should have For learning, we can use them. Eventually, we must have our own programs and we must have our own facility. You prepare your own app. User interface is important. Please remember that the users are those who are not tech savvy and don't care to be tech savvy. So you must make it so friendly they can input their document and get the output very easily. When I started using these facilities to help my friends who are judges or lawyers, I asked them how good is the summary, and sometimes it turned out some important words were missed out. I don't have time to tell you all the details of this, but we need to supplement that summary with a little bit of human intervention, at least initially. And maybe we can then think of modifying or improving our program. So this is an ongoing process. So right now what I have decided is that I will ask them to specify keywords. And if they are not included in summary, I will pick sentences with those keywords and paste. Very simple. I want to move on to another topic where I really know almost nothing, but the topic seems to be absolutely fascinating. Maybe you want to learn about it. So I saw this lecture on YouTube. Okay, so there is this guy named Jason Morris, and he talks about automating legal advice. So he is a student of an area called computational law. So he says through computer programming, so you can make your laptop a lawyer. How can you do that? Well, for that, law must be written as a computer program, he says. I was puzzled what he says. He says, here is an example. How much is 3 plus 4 multiplied by 2? So I said 3 plus 4 is 7, multiplied by 2 is 14. He said, no, there are two answers, 14 or 11. Oh, really? Yes. This is 3 plus 4 multiplied by 2. Now, if I see this way, because I have been taught from childhood that you multiply first and add later, so 4 times 2 is 8 plus 3 is 11. What is this supposed to signify? It says that mathematics language is much more precise than our common English language, or common language, anything. So he says we should use mathematics and programming language to write law. Replace natural language by mathematics. This is the idea. He says natural language has too much difficulty in making things precise. Anyway, even when written in natural language, I assure you, if you read a legal document, you don't understand it. So why bother? He says we can digitize pictures, we can digitize videos, we can digitize audios, we can digitize text. Then why can't we digitize laws? In fact, there is now, I understand, I had never heard this, my ignorance, that there is a programming language called Ergo. It is designed specifically to express laws. Not all laws, but apparently it is very useful in writing contracts. Okay, so maybe you want to learn Ergo. You want to see how contracts are written in Ergo. If you are at the front of everything, maybe you will become exclusive business people. I see this all the time. Bright students with innovative ideas in the West immediately start doing a business based on that training. I don't see that much here. Maybe Ergo is your license to your own startup. So he says, if you give the computer the law in the language it understands, and then you give the case, it will give advice. Finish. Cost will be nothing. Productivity of lawyers will go up. Accuracy will go up, but laws must be digitized. Okay. What spreadsheets did for accountancy, these formulations can do for law. Okay, so I have pretty much explained my philosophical position, my approach, and towards the end, I am going to tell you some suggestions in terms of projects. I have already given some, for example, this summary service, translation service, but maybe more. When you want to take a project, again, consistent with my idea that the problem must be important, I say, it must be about decisions which are made in a court very, very frequently, very routine decisions. That is where automation can give you benefit, give the courts a benefit. So we build a model and we arrive at a decision. Does that mean we become judges? No, no. We arrive at a decision, and that decision given by the program becomes the recommendation for the judge, and then judge can decide to accept that recommendation or override it. So judge will be the final authority. I will tell you a secret. Whenever this has been done, majority of the times judges accept the recommendation of the program. Once they are convinced that the program is good, they will routinely use it and take the decision and move on. What kind of situations? I will give you some examples. So whenever a person is arrested for a crime, he is presented before the court. That has to be done within 24 hours. This is called the habeas corpus. This is your right. Okay, you cannot be detained by police for more than 24 hours. Then they have to go to a judge, present that arrested person, tell the judge what is going on, and well, in 24 hours they may not have finished the investigation. They need more time. The judge has to decide whether that person will be kept in police custody or judicial custody. I do not know too much about the difference, but there is a difference. In judicial custody, police cannot interrogate that person or something like that. We can do this using logistic regression. There are historical cases, okay, and everywhere we know the decision. So fit that in logistic regression and develop a model program that gives the judge probability of selecting judicial custody. If it is high, then he should select judicial custody. If it is low, he should select police custody. Simple. Like that program, forget it. Do whatever you want. Okay. Not only do you have to decide whether that person will be in police hands or judicial custody, for how long, how many days police will get. This is called remand duration. Again, you can use historical cases, use multiple regression, very simple. But this will make a drastic change, dramatic change in the time taken, effort taken in the criminal court. Same way, bail decisions. Some people say it is routine. If not routine, then we use logistic regression. But there is a bond amount. How much bond for how much money? You can use multiple regression. So I told you that in US there is a tool called Compass, which gives the judge probability that this person, if he is given bail, he will run away and not come for the trial. So something like that we can develop. You should read about Compass. There are lots and lots of problems with Compass. Mathematicians in USA have rebelled now. They don't want to work with Compass. They think it is a bad program. We can improve upon it. We can develop our own. There are several such opportunities for automation and reducing time. And you will know more and more about them if you talk with judges and lawyers. Okay, so formulating charge and recording the plea. This is an essential step, but judges keep telling me it is very routine, it can be automated. There is something called section 313 where the accused person, he hears all the evidence against him and he gives his own case. And this can also be not totally automated, but the time taken can be reduced quite a lot. There is usually something called National Judicial Data Grid. Okay, and you should look up this. Now, I will just list a few more. So there are things called stay orders, probably in newspapers you have read about them. There are injunctions, there are interim applications. There is this business of getting the name of an heir on record, amendment application, adjournment application, arbitration application, notice of motion, chamber summons. I don't understand all these, but I am assured that all these happen very often, and if automated, that will save a lot of time for courts. So how do you go about it? You must have a friendly, experienced lawyer or judge who will tell you about all these things. But I tell you, most of the legal data is not used. Of course, this you can say about science also. Every scientific institute where I worked, a majority of the data collected at great expense is not used, but that apart. So PredPol, like I told you, is an AI which helps police. So you can think of, if you have friendly police people around you and are willing to share their data on crime history, you can build prediction of crime. I have last few minutes and I want to cite one or two examples which are remarkable. So there was this young student, only 19-year-old, Joshua Browder, and he was pissed off because he had to pay parking fine. So he wrote this software, Do Not Pay. How to handle a parking fine. 2.5 lakh people downloaded it. Now he has made it into a business. Now he's adding 1,000 other facilities. We can do the same thing. We can help people fill forms. I assure you the number of people who get into trouble because they don't know how to fill forms is endless. And I'm not talking about trivial things. Preparing a will. Okay? Check on the internet. There is a will writing service called Fair Will. And their charge is 9,000 rupees. I think you can give it free. I think I have an idea that it can be easily given for most people who have very simple wills. Filing a police complaint online, you don't have to go to the police station. People don't know. You can teach it. Drafting an affidavit, even students need affidavit. Everybody needs affidavit. We can create a facility on our website. Dr. Dhananjay Y. Chandrachud is the youngest member of the Supreme Court of India. His father, Y.V. Chandrachud, was Chief Justice of India. So this guy is the youngest fellow, and like everywhere, younger people are more tech savvy. So he has been given the charge of something called e-initiative in Indian courts. He has taken many steps to achieve some of the points mentioned. You can watch the latest news. He wants to link land records with courts to help in land litigation. He wants training for lawyers in use of facilities in Indian languages. Remember, each of these things is an opportunity for you. September 18, this is when I heard that I'm going to participate in this webinar. I looked at the news and it said that Justice Chandrachud is going to virtually launch e-court projects in Madras High Court. And let us forget all the details. But e-court services are to be given through e-Seva Kendra, one in every campus. So about 30 to 100 Kendras will be opened. There will be biometric attendance. We were talking about checking attendance of people. Now, Madras High Court has bought 400 biometric machines with 80 lakh rupees. Okay, so they are already putting biometric attendance facilities. We just have to use it for automating. Remember, I said a case will be adjourned if not everybody is present. That thing can be automated now. So things are moving. Just last bit about how people elsewhere have done such projects. So there is this London firm called Hodge, Jones and Allen, and they were interested in personal injury cases. And they collaborated with a professor of economics in University College London. They took 600 cases of the previous 12 months and fitted logistic regression to predict win or loss, and multiple regression to predict compensation. We are talking about personal injury, okay? If they can do it bloody well, we all can do it. What we lack is initiative. Predicting case outcome. We are coming to the end of my presentation. Maybe I should skip a few slides. You can predict outcome of a case using historical data. And in this case, for example, Cambridge University students wrote programs which could predict 80% accuracy. Let me go right to the end. So all in all, I am saying that delays in courts is a very important social problem for our country. Number one. Number two, data science, and by that I mean computer science, statistics, information technology, all combined, can play a role. Definitely they can play a role. You can have exciting projects for your whatever MSc or whatever degree you are taking. The one thing that is absolutely essential for such work is collaboration with lawyers and judges. So my recommendation to you is get out of the rut. I feel so disappointed when, especially in statistics, that is when I get to review some of the projects. They go to some American website Kaggle or whatever the hell it is. Get down some data. They don't know nothing about that data. They go to another website which has some software. They take that data and push it in. And whatever is the output, that becomes their project. This is a terrible way of doing projects. So if you are doing that, don't do it. Do something which is meaningful, which you will remember for the rest of your life. Even others will remember. Okay? So get out of the rut, try this adventure, and I think even failure will be glorious here. Thank you.
Hello, is it over, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, now it is time for audience for questioning. I request the audience to ask questions. Hello. Audience, please ask questions.
Dr. Gore, can I ask you a simple question?
Yes.
Firstly, I'd like to thank you very much for giving such an entertaining talk and opening up possibilities of using logistic regression and multiple regression and all these things in the area of law and related issues. This is really very exciting to see. I remember the use of logistic regression being so wide, even Amazon uses it often for figuring out whether these some claims are false or not, things like that. So some of our ISI students are employed to do that job. So I'm sure this is also another interesting possibility. I'm just wondering whether, has it been any case studies? Has logistic regression been used for deciding on bails or judicial custody or police custody, anything like any case study, whether it is real life or not?
Oh, it is already in use, not in India. All these initiatives are already there in the West.
Not in India.
Not in India, not to my knowledge.
Okay. But in elsewhere, they're being used.
Elsewhere, they are in use, and in fact, they have discovered some weaknesses of these things. And you will see a lot of. If you search on YouTube, you will get many lectures about this and what are the problems, etc., etc. So, for example, one problem with logistic regression that they have discovered is that it is unfair to black people, and they don't know how to sort it out. So, but I think we will be beneficiaries of experience of previous users who will be able to do a better job of designing things. So they are all used in the West, no question about that.
Well, that's simply because the regression model is built on past data, and the past data is also biased. I think that's why probably.
So the challenge for us will be how to get around that problem.
How to get around that problem.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is great.
Any more questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is simple. That having done many years as a plaintiff or a respondent in the court, I see that lawyers don't know how to write the court cases, nor do the during any kind of presentation, the judge themselves quite often speak very poor English. I think all these people should be taught properly how to express themselves. I agree that any kind of software development and standardization of text will help. But finally, the chips are down. They have to speak it up, and to speak it correctly and properly, that something needs to be also inserted. Thank you.
Yes, I take that comment from Mr. Sohan Modak. But you see, my attitude is we can't change everything. And if you want to collaborate, you cannot take an antagonistic position. So in the initial steps, I will not complain about their incompetence. I will say, jo bhi hai so hai.
Sir, Asha Kamath here, sir.
Yes.
Sir, from your talks, what I can foresee is maybe we can think of some capacity building, coming up with modules for lawyers. and conduct it in an executive mode, like some kind of, weekend interactions or something. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you are absolutely right, except that these executive programs, if you take the example of IIM, only those people can conduct these programs well who already are regular consultants. If teachers are bookish, they cannot conduct these programs well. So I would say the first step is practice. And the next step is teach. Yes, there is enormous opportunity for teaching. Our lawyers and judges also need help. But you cannot teach if you have not practiced. So I would say start by practicing. Give the projects to students in which teachers also participate actively. Once you get a confidence that you can handle this, whatever you have done, your case studies should become the teaching material for lawyers.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you.
Any more questions? Hello, any more questions?
Let me make an appeal to the audience that if you have any interest in doing something in this field, and if you cannot come up with a question immediately, it does not matter. Kindly take my contact details from Dr. Asha or her associates, and I will be happy to interact with you if you have specific interest in terms of doing something.
Sir, we have a question in the chat. Mr. Pradeep has asked that can artificial intelligence be used to analyze our law and recommend amendments?
Well, that is a very highly sophisticated use. I suppose it is possible, but I am a worm. I am not an eagle, reviewing the legal system. If you are interested in that, please look up the work of the NGO I mentioned, Vidhi Policy in Delhi. They do exactly this. They are the ones who were helpful in organizing the IBC, that is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code and some laws like that. So you should look up this Vidhi NGO in Delhi and you will see what it means to give advice in terms of formulating laws. But for most people, I recommend that is a very thin air, rare, infrequent use. Whereas what we need is something applicable to daily activity which happens millions of times in courts today.
Can I make a comment? The question is about jurisprudence. How is the connectivity for jurisprudence is guaranteed in this system? Because most of the cases, the jurisprudence is not exactly something that either the lawyer or often even the judges are aware of. So how to make that available online automatically, depending on the nature of case or cases?
So we don't want to spread ourselves too thinly. We have very limited capacities. I am talking about statisticians and computer scientists and information technology people. And they should not bite more than what they can chew. So what you are talking about is a very important issue, but not really where these disciplines can really make a quick impact. So my concern is bigger impact on the mundane matters of the courts, not in terms of philosophy. For example, I feel personally that the foundational philosophy that every innocent person must be free, even if it means many non-innocent criminals go scot-free. This logic I don't like. But I don't challenge this. This is not the place and time to challenge that. There are many other things to sort out. So I would not address that question at all.
Right. Okay.
Any more questions? Himanshu, any more questions in chats?
No, ma'am.
No. Okay. So if there are no more questions, I'm very thankful to Professor Anil Gore for the very interesting topic. And he has already suggested various areas where data scientists can contribute. in terms of writing various softwares. I hope all the data scientists as well as students of data science, they'll think over it, and in the years to come, the delay in Indian judiciary, I hope it will reduce. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yeah, we will be moving to the next session. The next session is by Professor Anup Devanji. I'm happy to introduce the second speaker of the day, Professor Anup Devanji. Professor Anup Devanji, PhD in statistics from University of Waterloo, Canada. And he is a very reputed and experienced professor of statistics at ISI Kolkata. He has more than 31 years of experience in academic and research. His research interests are survival analysis, reliability, stochastic modeling, and clinical trials. Today, he will be delivering his talk on the topic use of additional information for current status data with the two competing risks and missing failure types. I invite Professor Anup Devanji to take over. Over to you, sir.
Okay, so I already shared my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. I'd like to start by thanking Asha Madam and the chair, Professor MAHE, for this opportunity. And it's going to be a big switch from legalities to biostatistics and medical issues. And this probably will be a little more academic than the other Professor Gore's talk, which has direct applications. But anyway, let me start. I have a big title here, and I would like to dwell on each of those keywords for some time. But the first one, additional information, has very natural meaning. But we like to explain what are the kind of additional information we'll be talking about. We'll talk about current status data. It's an area in survival analysis. Then competing risks, then missing failure types. All these things we'll slowly describe. Before going further, let me acknowledge this is a thesis work of Tamalika Kole. It's part of her thesis work. So I should acknowledge her credit here. Okay, so this is the outline. I would start with some introduction, explaining those keywords, problem statement, data, and the likelihood, and the kind of additional data what is needed. We would see why it is needed, that we have to explain, and briefly describe the parametric, non-parametric analysis, illustrate with data analysis, and indicate some future work. So, introduction. Survival analysis, I suppose most of the people in the audience know, but still it focuses on the analysis of some time to event data. Mostly it is called failure time or survival time. So we'll be using this term failure time to mean that it is the time to event. It doesn't have to be a failure. It can be anything, it can be the time, till you switch off from this online event since the beginning. It could be that time. So it is basically your patient's time. The event of interest can be death, some disease, AIDS or HIV, or many other things, failure of machine parts. Censoring is an integral part of survival analysis. That exact failure time is not available. Some partial information is available. We know a set where the failure time belongs to. Mostly we see right censoring, where the right tail of the failure time is censored, or we observe a time when the observation terminates, and we know the failure did not occur by that time. So the exact failure time is more than that observation time. Similarly, we have left censored time, where in the observation time, you see the failure has already occurred. So failure has occurred sometimes before the failure time, before the observation time. So we have right censoring and left censoring. Right censoring is more common. Left censoring is rather uncommon. But in current status data, what we observe is the current status of failure at the observation time. It is also sometimes called monitoring time. When you are observing an individual and for the purpose of monitoring or whatever, you can see the status of failure, whether the failure has already occurred or has not occurred. So if the event has already occurred, then it is left censored, because we know the failure time is more than prior to that time. And if the event has not yet occurred, then it is right censored. So the failure time has not yet occurred. So mathematically, if my monitoring time is X, then failure time could be either 0 to X or X to infinity. So we have an indicator variable delta to say whether it is delta equal to 1 means failure has occurred, it is 0 to X, and delta equal to 0 means it hasn't occurred, so failure time is between X to infinity. So this is the current status data. And when we talk about failure, failure can be due to several causes, and these are termed as competing risk. So one of the cause, if it happens, then the other causes cannot happen to that individual. So that's the principle of competing risk. So it includes, in addition to the failure time, there is another random variable called failure type. It's a discrete valued random variable. This is a very common phenomena in many areas. Like the example I have given you, your patient's time today, when you switch off from this system, it could be due to your boredom from this whole session, or it could be due to your network problem or some other engagement. So there are different reasons for your switching off from this thing. So classic example is, of course, the natural death. It could be due to different causes. So having said about competing risk, missing failure types is also a very common phenomena. When assigning the cause of failure, the pathologists are often very reluctant to ascertain the exact cause or the true cause of failure, because of the limitations of technology or whatever, the diagnostic facilities and all these things. Instead, they are often agreeable to narrow down to a set of possible causes. And we assume that the set of possible cause or possible types will contain the true type. So this gives rise to uncertainty in the true cause, because we maybe often we can observe the true cause, but sometimes we do not observe it. We observe a set of possible causes, and we make an assumption that that set contains the true cause. So we say that there is no misspecification of failure type. So that is the kind of assumption we'll make. In tumorigenicity data, sometimes you see death with tumor present. Then the pathologists find it difficult to say whether the death is due to the tumor, due to the presence of the tumor, or due to some other causes. So that time, the observation consists of both of the two things. So besides this, there are many other areas where I will also give an example with hearing loss. You will see why the failure type can be hidden. We use the word must in this talk here. So let's look at the problem statement. So Cole, in two technical reports, these are part of her thesis also, addressed this issue of missing competing risk. And they have assumed some time-independent missing probabilities. I will define what is missing probabilities later on. And they assume time dependence because, this is a simpler model. But while doing this work, they have faced some identifiability problems. I will state those identifiability results later on. So in order to deal with that identifiability issue, you have to make some modeling assumptions on the probabilities of missing failure type. Those modeling assumptions are again additional assumptions on the missing failure type. Another alternative is to use some additional information. Instead of making additional modeling assumption, you can make some additional information available, make use of that judicious use of that so that we can alleviate this problem of identifiability without making any additional modeling assumption. This is a very standard problem in statistics. Either you need more modeling assumptions or you need more information. So in these two previous work, Kole and Dewanji, they have talked about using modeling assumptions. And in this talk, I'll talk about using additional informations to deal with this identifiability problem. Okay. So let us first look at what are the kind of data in terms of notations. So T is the random variable which represents the failure time. And we have two competing risks, M equal to 2. That is also a simplified assumption, simplifying assumptions. So J is the failure type random variable which belongs to 1 or 2, either 1 or 2. X is the monitoring time or the observation time. We assume X to be independent of the failure time T and the failure type J. And what we observe instead of T and J, we observe X and G is the set of possible causes. G could be a singleton set, G equal to 1 or G equal to 2, the set 1 or set 2, in which case there is no missingness. But G could be 1, 2, the set 1, 2, which represents the complete missingness for M equal to 2. It means I do not know whether it is 1 or 2, but it could be either 1 or 2. So this is when there is a failure or delta equal to 1 or T less than equal to X. But if T greater than X or delta equal to 0, then there is no set. We only know that a failure did not occur. Then we denote G as the empty set phi. Okay. So the support of G, that calligraphic G, is essentially the set 1, set 2, set 1, 2, and the empty set phi. Okay, and as I said before, there is no misspecification in the missing failure type. So it means that if you see G equal to set 1, it means that true cause is 1. True cause cannot be 2. But if set G is 1, 2, then true cause could be either 1 or 2. So this is the kind of assumptions. This is very reasonable assumptions. Now, what are the quantities of interest that we want to estimate? These are the subdistribution function fj t theta, probability t less than equal to t, j equal to j. You see, it is not exactly a proper distribution function because of j equal to j inside the probability statement. So it is called subdistribution function. And if I add f1 and f2, the capital Ft, that is the proper CDF. And the proper survival function st1 minus ft. So those are the quantities of interest, fjt or ft. hx is the CDF of x, density x. This is assumed to be nuisance, so we are not interested in any parameters or anything associated with hx. Now, for j equal to 1, 2, and g belonging to G not equal to phi, it means there is a failure. The missing probabilities, sometimes it is called masking probabilities, that is a more common terminology, masking probabilities, is defined as PGJXT. It means probability that G equal to small g, that is you observe set of possible causes as small g, conditional probability, given that failure time is T, which is less than equal to observation time x equal to x, and j equal to failure type equal to j. Note that in the conditioning event, we don't observe t equal to t. We observe x equal to x. We also don't observe j equal to small j. We observe g equal to small g. Now, since we assume no misspecification, if g does not contain j, then this probability is 0. And if you add up overall G containing J, this will be 1. Now, certain conditions on PGJXT. If you make this assumption that PGJXT is independent of all those 4 quantities, G, J, X, T, then what we have, we call missing completely at random, MCAR. Those of you, familiar with this literature of missing data analysis by Little and Rubin, they will immediately recognize this missing completely at random assumption. And they will also see that when PGJXT depend on or may depend on G and X, the observable quantities, but certainly not on the unobservable quantity J and T, then we have missing at random. But in these two situations, we say that missingness is ignorable. But if PGJXT, what we assume it time independent, so not on X and T. That is a simplifying assumption again. But it depends on both G and J. So J is an unobserved quantity. So that's why it is non-ignorable missing, or it is called missing not at random. So PGJXT does not depend on XT. This is our assumption. And it depends on G and J. Now that I have only two competing risks, so I denote PJ as in the bottom line as the probability of observing the singleton set J given the 2 cause J. It is the probability of correct diagnosis. That is as PJ. Now for two causes, I have P1 and P2. And since there are two causes, so P1 to J, so probability of observing that mask set 1 and 2 given 2 cause J is 1 minus Pj. So these are the two probabilities, P1 and P2, which are called missing probabilities or masking probabilities. They suddenly become important in the context of missing failure type. Okay, what is my observed data? Remember, xg. So xi for I equal to 1 to n. So I have n IID observations from this xg and their common density function f star xg is probability x equal to x, hx, and then p1 f1x. If I observe g equal to 1 and t less than equal to x, so t less than equal to x and j equal to 1 is f1x, and then multiply by probability g equal to 1 given j equal to 1, which is p1. So P1 F1x Hx. Similarly, if g equal to 2, then P2 F2x, and if g equal to 1, 2, and by simple probability calculation, this is summation j equal to 1 to 1 minus Pj times Fjx. And if g equal to empty, it means the failure time did not occur, then Sx times Hx. Now, since Hx is nuisance, we consider the conditional density f star g given x, which has the same form without the Hx term. So Hx just drops out from these things. So in these two work of Cole and Dewanji we have mentioned, they have worked with this likelihood, this density, product of these densities as the likelihood. Okay, and they have faced the identifiability problem. Let me quickly summarize those identifiability issues. They are, they require proof, but I'm not giving you the proofs. When both P1, P2 are known, that is very unlikely that you know the correct probability of correct diagnosis. Then the model f star gx is identifiable. What we mean by identifiable? It means there are, if f star g given x is different for two different data sets, if they are equal, if two different model parameters, if f star gx is equal for all gx, then those two model parameters have to be identical. That is the identifiability issues. This identifiability is very important in order to carry on further analysis. If one of P1, P2, say P1 is known and the other is unknown, but that lies strictly between 0 and less than equal to 1, 0 less than P1 less than equal to 1, then the model is again identifiable. So I have, instead of 2 P1, P2, I have 1 P1, P2 now, which is unknown. If both are unknown, then the model is not identifiable. So I cannot carry out analysis if both P1, P2 are unknown. So what Cole has done in these two work, that she has taken this assumption P2 equal to CP1. It means if the pathologist cannot tell me the exact diagnosis probabilities, they can at least tell me their relative values. That if I can diagnose this as certain probability, this has twice that probability or something like that. So in that case, if C is known, with this assumption P2 equal to CP1, the model is identifiable. So Cole has assumed this result 4, and worked with that identifiability assumption and carried out parametric and non-parametric analysis. So as I said before, if I don't want to make this assumption and I want to estimate P1 and P2, then I need additional information. So this is the likelihood which Tolle worked on, so which I already talked about and you already know. So what are the types of additional data which I can think about in order to deal with these identifiability issues? So there is one called validation data. So if you look at missing cause, G equal to 1, 2, then I can take a validation sample, a subsample of those with missing causes, and by some stringent diagnostic procedure, after validation, I can observe the true cause, whether it is 1 or 2. So this is the kind of situation, if it is available, I can make use of this validation data and carry out analysis. Another type is called indirect information on masking probabilities. So if I know that there is a masking, then pathologist, I can talk to the pathologist, try to extract out of him the probability that it is 1 or 2. I see that G, the set 1, 2 is the set of possible causes. Please tell me what is the probability that it is 1 or what is the probability it is 2. Pathologists, if they don't have to make the exact statement, they may sometimes say, well, it is 70% chance that it is equal to 1 or 30% chance it is equal to 2. So if that probability is available, then I can make use of those probabilities. So I have now one, instead of P1, P2, I have one Q1, Q2, one thing known, and I can estimate P1, P2 from there. We'll see how to do that. So let's see how to make use of this validation data. Suppose V is the set of all those observations with missing failure type. I take a random sample SV from these with NV less than equal to size of V. The true failure type, whether it is 1 or 2, in the validation sample can be ascertained. And that has probability J equal to 1, T less than equal to X, G equal to 1, 2. This is the probability of observing J equal to 1, given that G equal to masking set. So these probabilities will enter the likelihood function for the validation sample. If you notice the previous slide and these probabilities, this previous slide, these QJs, I am trying to say that this QJ information is available. It is known to me. This is one scenario. And the other scenario is this probability is to be estimated by using the information from validation sample. So these two types of additional informations are basically same. In one case, I am saying those information is known to us. In another case, I am saying that information is available to estimate those probabilities, these probabilities. These are the QJ's probabilities. So essentially, they are the same thing. But anyway, given the validation sample, this is my validation sample likelihood. So if after validation, if I see cause is 1, so this is the probability. If cause is 2, this is the probability. If 1 or 2. Okay. Now, if I include multiply these validation sample likelihood with the original likelihood, I get total likelihood. And this total likelihood, if you quickly see, it has P1, it has 1 minus P1, it has P2, 1 minus P2 over here. And so as a result, everything is estimable. So I mean, I'm just giving an indication why P1, P2 could be identifiable. And when additional information on QJ is available, if QJ is available by simple Bayes rule, I can find probability of masking probability given J equal to J as this. QJ times delta equal to 1, G equal to 1, 2. And now these probabilities can be estimated directly from the data using some kind of multinomial likelihood. That if probability G equal to G, that can be estimated by Fg by total number n, where Fg is the number of failures with G as the. So 1 minus Pj hat, this is the MLE of masking probability 1 minus Pj given by this. So P1 hat and P2 hat can be estimated using their MLEs can be obtained. Now the strategy is that use these MLEs of Pjs as known quantities in order to estimate the remaining model parameters. If the model parameter is a parametric case, there are other model parameters associated with subdistribution functions. If it is a non-parametric case, then the subdistribution functions themselves are the quantities of interest. So we have also seen that if P1, P2 are known, then they are identifiable. So I am treating these MLEs as known. So this is my strategy. I'm not saying that this is maximum likelihood. This will not be usual maximum likelihood anyway, MLE in that sense. I only have maximum likelihood estimates of P1 and P2. And what we have, I am terming it as approximate MLE, because some parameters I am replacing them as their MLEs and then maximizing the likelihood. Okay. So as a result, I cannot use the observed information matrix also for the computation of standard error. So some suitable bootstrap method has to be used, and we have used that. So it is kind of strange that when I have information exactly known on the QJs, I don't have MLEs, I have approximate MLEs. But when I have data available to estimate the P1, P2 or those probabilities, then I have exact MLEs. And you see the parametric and non-parametric analysis, they should be very simple routine thing right now after that strategy is available. The parametric analysis, now my parameters are theta, the parameters involved in subdistribution functions. So eta vector, theta, P1, P2 are the parameters of interest. And in the validation sample approach, I can obtain MLE of the whole eta, theta, P1, P2, everything is there. And the standard errors can be estimated from the observed information matrix. But in the second approach, when QJs are available, I just talked about it, MLEs of P1, P2 are available, but approximate MLE of theta with bootstrap standard errors, that is only available. Okay, so, but I have some asymptotic results also. In the validation sample, I have that asymptotic normality, consistency, and all these things as in the parametric case. You can look at Lehman and Casella's book, and these results under certain regularity conditions, and those regularity conditions can be verified in this case also. But what about in the other case? In the other case, the approximate maximum likelihood estimate, if I denote it by this is not an MLE, but we can prove that it is a consistent estimator of theta hat under one condition, that the partial derivatives of these with respect to P1, P2, those are bounded. So if those partial derivatives are bounded of big order OP1, big OP1, then in the neighborhood of the true values, then the consistency is there. We could not prove the asymptotic normality, but our simulation studies indicates that the coverage probabilities are pretty close to 95%. That indicates some, that asymptotic properties are probably somewhere near normal, but theoretically we could not prove it. Okay, how about non-parametric analysis? We make a simplifying assumption again here. We suppose there are k fixed monitoring times, tau 1, tau 2, tau k, with ni individuals in tau I. Now, DGI is the number of failures with observed set of possible causes G out of ni individuals. So, DI is the number of failures at time tau I, and N summation ni is the total number of observations. If you write down the likelihood, you will see that it will have only fj tau i's or 1 minus f tau I. So these are the fj tau I, j equal to 1 to I equal to 1 to k. These are the only quantities which are estimable in these. In addition to the identifiability issues, we have the estimability issues here, that fj tau I is only estimable, fj x for other x is not estimable. So P1, P2 are additional quantities. So we remember these fj tau i's, they satisfy, these are subdistribution functions. So they satisfy some isotonic constraint. Fj tau I has to be non-decreasing. They has to lie between 0 and 1. That is not that difficult, but isotonic constraint is more difficult to deal with. And their summation has to be also non-decreasing. So we reparameterize this in terms of what is called interval hazards. Lambda ji is these, and this is a one-to-one transformation. Now these lambda ji's are totally unconstrained. These are lying between 0, 1, and 1 only. And this new set of parameters P1, P2, and lambda JIs, they can be estimated much easily and much more easily. So we look at this kind of reparameterization. And since this is a one-to-one function, estimating lambda JIs is same as estimating F zeta Ys. You can also find standard errors of lambda JIs, and from there, standard error of F zeta Ys using the invariance property of the delta method we have. Okay, again, the routine thing, validation sample gives MLE of all these parameters, this gamma, P1, P2, and all the lambda JIs. You can get the MLEs. And in the second approach, when QJs are information on QJs available, we obtain MLEs of P1, P2, but approximate MLEs of the interval hazards, the lambdas, and the standard errors obtained by bootstrap method. And just like in parametric case, we also have these validation sample theories. Since I have, focused on only K failure times, this has essentially become a parametric case. So with a large number of parameters though. So anyway, those consistency and asymptotic normality is available in the validation sample case, and in the indirect information case, again, under those boundedness condition on the derivatives, the consistency of the lambdas, the approximate MLEs is theoretically obtainable. Okay, so let us do some simulation studies first, and then illustrate with some real data. So in order to, we have carried out many simulation studies. I'm just studying. Yes. How much time do I have?
Sir, you have 10 minutes, sir.
Okay. So the failure time distribution we take as exponential, and the rate parameters are in the ratio of 6:4. It means two, sub hazards, called specific hazards. Validation sample we take from V of a fraction of F, and it's a random sample of F fraction. We take either 20% or 50% here. P1, P2 in the simulation we take as 90% or 80%. So under this P1, P2, the true values of Q1, Q2 can be Q1 and Q2. This can be computed as 0.429 and 0.571. These are the true Q1, Q2 given P1, P2 and these exponential distribution and all these things. This can be calculated. But we don't know when we do the real data analysis. We know only in simulation studies. So we also take two wrong choices of Q1, Q2 in our simulation studies, okay, in addition to this true choice. So for validation sample approach, bias and all these things are, these standard phenomena that with sample size, they decrease, the efficiency increases and the bias decreases. And for fixed N, the precision also, efficiency also increases. If I increase the fraction of validation sample, the CP values, the coverage probability values are very close to 95% with increasing sample size. So it's an indication of asymptotic normality. And when Q1, Q2 are correctly given, then these bias and SSE and all these things are they decrease with increasing sample size. CP values are also closer to 0.95, which I have already mentioned before. But if I have wrong choice of Q1, Q2, see, I am making assumption that Q1, Q2 are known to me. So, but even then, if you wrongly know them, there is bias. Although the bias is mild, but there is bias, and if the sample size is more, then you can see the bias is more. So I am not going to present you a lot of simulation results because this is very standard conclusions. But let me quickly illustrate a real data. It's on hearing loss data. There are three general types of hearing loss that has been observed. One is called sensorineural hearing loss, SNHL. One is conductive hearing loss. Another one is mixed hearing loss. I'll describe what is mixed hearing loss. This data comes from one Institute of Speech and Hearing Disabilities. This is located in Kolkata only, just across ISI. Analyses are performed on the basis of data in right ear only. So we have data from right, left, both ears, but we look at concentrated on right ears. And the monitoring time is the age at which the patient appears for diagnosis. So it is an institute for speech and hearing disability. So the patients come. When they come, that is their monitoring time. And then they say whether they have hearing loss or not. If they have hearing loss, then their hearing loss type is, there are 3 types. So SNHL, conductive, and mixed hearing loss. So the first 2 types, SNHL and conductive hearing loss, these are the true primary types of hearing loss. Okay, and the mixed hearing loss, both the types are present, SNHL and conductive. So one type appears first and the other is acquired later. That's the understanding we got from there. So both are present there, but we don't know which one occurred first. So we take T, the event of interest is the hearing loss due to the type occurring first. As a result,
yes, I already have lunch. It's lunchtime.
okay.
Dude, the color.
Okay, so hearing loss due to type occurring first. So if one occurs already, then the second one cannot be the first. So it obeys the principle of competing risk. So the mixed hearing loss, so it's a competing risk set up with 2 competing risks, SNHL and conductive. And the mixed hearing loss can be interpreted as the missing type because we don't know which one occurred first. So this is G equal to 1, 2 for the mixed hearing loss. So this is the summary of data. Tau I is the monitoring time or the diagnosis time. So if I look at this frequency data, I have 409 patients in this group. When I look at non-parametric data, I'll look at this right end points as the tau I's. So this many are due to cause 1, this many due to cause 2. These are due to cause 1 means SNHL, 2 means conductive, and this means mixed type, and these many did not have NI minus DI, this many, they did not have hearing loss at all. So you see that there is a big number of SNHL in the early ages, and due to a conductive hearing loss are relatively few. Okay, so you can see this from the data itself. Okay, so we don't have any validation sample in this example, so I cannot illustrate that methodology here. But instead, we illustrate the methodology with indirect information on masking probabilities. We had asked for values of Q1, Q2 from those people in that institute. Well, they are pretty vague, but apparently they said that, well, this is the Q1 could be pretty low and all this. So we have taken these 3 choices. We have taken many other choices, but we have seen that this Q1 is rather very small. So we have taken this side. It means if there is a mixed type, it is very unlikely that SNHL has occurred first. So that you will see why it is that. These are the 3 we have studied. We have tried exponential, variable, both of them. And when we did non-parametric analysis, then we split the range of monitoring times into these 5 intervals with the right end points 10, 30, 50, 70, 90 being the monitoring times, the 5 monitoring times. So we would be able to estimate F1, F2 at these 5 monitoring times when we go to non-parametric analysis. So for the parametric analysis, we can carry out a goodness of fit statistics. This is some kind of modified chi-square statistics. And we look at delta GI. This is kind of Pearson's chi-square test, where we look at delta GI is 1 or 0 if it is ith individual is due to G. G could be 1, set 1, set 2, set 1, 2, or pi. PGI star is the corresponding probability, and we estimate them under the MLEs and all these. And the null distribution p-value is obtained by simulation method again. The null distribution is estimated by simulation. So quickly, let me summarize how we do that. We estimate the model parameters under the assumed parametric model, and then calculate this chi-square M, the modified chi-square statistics. Now we simulate a large number, say 500 of those data sets of same size n from the assumed model with the estimated model parameters. Compute chi-square M for each simulated data, and now p-value is estimated. This 500 chi-square M values gives me the null distribution, the histogram of that. So the p-value is estimated by proportion of times the value of chi-square M exceeds the observed value. Okay, so that's how we carry out some goodness of fit. We also calculate the AIC in order to compare exponential and viable fit. Also different choices of Q1, Q2. So we depend on this AIC to assess, make an assessment of which Q1, Q2 values are more likely, since the experimenter here could not give me those informations. So if we look at parametric analysis, I have exponential fit and viable fit, and I see the exponential does not fit at all. P-value is very small, and whereas the viable gives a pretty good fit. And among the three values of the pair Q1, Q2, Q1 equal to 0.02 gives me the lowest AIC. So as a result, we choose this Q1, Q2 as 0.02 and 0.98. Make that assessment that this is probably the right value. And with that, if I look at the parameter estimates, that lambda 1 is much bigger than lambda 2. Its SNHL is predominant. We have seen that before also. And with viable fit, it is a kind of DFR. So as you age, B estimate is a parameter is 0.688. As you age, the risk is reducing. And also probability of correct diagnosis for 1 is 99.7% and for 2 is 34.9%. So if the true cause is 1, then 99.7% you can ascertain it. That is the meaning of P1. So that's why if you see a mixed type, the probability that it will be 1 is very low, because if it is 1, you can estimate it. You can diagnose it correctly. Okay, so this is all we have seen already said that over there, that 99.7% is the probability of correct diagnosis with SNHL. It can be diagnosed very easily. And 35% for conductive hearing loss. Non-parametric analysis also gives me the very similar thing. I have these 5 points, and I see F1 is more dominating than F2. And these values of Q1, Q2, 0.02 and 0.98 gives me the lowest AIC. This is my chosen model after the analysis. And P1 99.7, P2 34.9, just like in parametric case. So this conclusion is again same as the parametric case. And having said that, let us indicate some future work, some of which have been already taken up, and random monitoring time in non-parametric analysis. See, non-parametric analysis, I have fixed monitoring time, tau 1, tau 2, tau 3, but in general, patient can come at any age or any time. So inclusion of that, the estimation method goes through as it is. There is no problem with that. But studying the asymptotic properties become very, very difficult. In fact, the existing results indicate that although there may be consistency, the asymptotic normality may not be there. But we are yet to establish those asymptotic results. But that is a big challenge for random monitoring time in non-parametric analysis. In parametric analysis, that is not a problem. Time-dependent masking probabilities, the Cole's thesis has addressed that issue in some limited way because it requires further modeling. But a careful study of these is also required. More than 2 competing risks, yes, this has not been considered in Cole's thesis, but some students over here in ISI are addressing this. They are also trying that, but it's an open problem. People can still try that. Certainly, it requires more modeling. I think the principle would be very similar. Presence of other types of additional information. I have looked at only 2 types, and when I wrote down these comments, I only have this idea in mind that instead of ascertaining Q1 and Q2 exactly, you could have a prior distribution of that Q1 lies between these and these with certain probabilities of it, just like in Bayesian paradigm. And then you can treat them as either random effect or get into Bayesian analysis. That is the kind of idea I had, but I have not looked at it myself. So this is another area which people can try when additional information is available in terms of some kind of prior distribution. Relaxation of misspecification assumption, that you can allow misspecification in that observed set of possible causes. So it means that if your observed set is set 1, then 2 can be, failure type 2 can be a possible, can be the true cause. So allowing that means you have to suddenly have more modeling assumptions and more information. So that unless you have more information or more modeling assumptions, I don't think one can address this issue. Incorporate covariates and get into regression analysis. That might help in dealing with the identifiability issues. One student over here is investigating that. Just like in cure rate models, presence of covariates sometimes helps in the identifiability problem. So it might do that trick over here also. That is my hunch, and we have made some progress in that, but I'm not in a position to give you those results over here. So anyway, these are the possible extensions of future works. These are the 2 references I already mentioned. These are technical reports and they have been submitted already. And thank you for listening. Although I welcome questions in this platform, but people have if they don't have my address, this Himanshu and others have my address. You can, as Professor Gore said, you can address those questions to me later on. Thank you. I'm done over here. Anybody listening? Himanshu and
yeah, hello. It is time for the participants. I request the participants to interact. Please ask questions. I request the participants to ask questions. Yeah.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm Lintu from Department of Data Science, Manipal.
Yeah. Lintu, go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, in a data, if we have 2 competing rates, and I know the time to those 2 competing events, but the problem is I don't have the time for the censoring event or censoring time. So I have 2 pieces of information at hand, like the maximum time taken by the subject, subjects are 30 days. And also I know that the study ended on particular day. So say some 31st December 2019, something like that. So if I go with the second option of fixing the particular date, what will happen is the maximum, the time variable is taking values like 50, 60 and all, which exceeds the first condition of maximum time taken is 30 days. So with what values should I fill in the censoring time? Should I go with the maximum number of days, 30 days, or should I fix the end of the study and fill in the values?
Are you referring to some of your own data?
Yes, sir.
As I understood, is it some kind of current status data? I have not got the, maybe I did not hear you properly at the beginning.
Okay.
Can you describe what is the failure time for you?
Sir, actually, it's 2 things: discharge and the death. So these two events I am considering as completing events, and I have censored observations also.
Madam, I'm not able to hear you properly, but if you can send me a write-up through email address, I'm sure I can, Mangshu will have my email address. I can certainly talk to you over email or if needed over phone afterwards to see if I can comment on your data set. But I think this is, first of all, I'm not able to hear you properly somehow. And secondly, I don't think there is enough time to discuss your data. So I'm not sure if your data is of current state in nature of current status or not. And you are talking about some maximum number observable or something like that. I'm not getting that scenario here. So I'm sorry, but I would certainly like to listen to you. And I also did not get your name, but just refer to this discussion when you send me an email. I would love to look at your data.
Sure,
Okay.
sir. My name is Lintu.
Lintu.
From
Okay.
Manipal. Yeah.
Lintu, I think I met you in Bangalore, right?
Yeah.
I remember. No, can you? So you have my email address. Okay, you can. You speak to me? Okay. Thank you.
Sir. Okay, sure. Thank you, sir.
Any more questions? I hope there are no more questions.
Just one dilemma of applied statisticians, Professor Divanji. It was an excellent insight into how to deal with the competing risks. But the dilemma of applied statisticians is when we work with the real world data, we are hardly into asymptotics. And moreover, when we look at the distributions, we will never have a smooth distribution like exponential or variable. Sometimes we end up with mixtures. So what is your advice for handling with such data, which involves competing?
I think if you have sufficient data, go for non-parametric analysis. And yes, finding the asymptotic properties are in non-parametric analysis that is difficult. But these days the advent of simulation method, there are a lot of simulation-based results. Like I reported the bootstrap method for obtaining standard error, or even simulation-based method for testing goodness of fit of a particular parametric model. These are useful tools. So if you have sufficient data, one can go for non-parametric analysis. But I would suggest that you should try for some standard parametric models and go for the goodness of fit test and see if they are fitting well, because a parametric model is more interpretable, and non-parametric analysis has some difficulties too when the context of the problem is more and more complicated. So that is my suggestion. Yeah, that is a standard problem for any statistical practitioners. Yeah. So which model to take, which analysis to go to, and in real data sometimes we have very few data. So then I don't think one should go for non-parametric analysis. You have to try to fit some parametric.
Thank you,
sir. Sir, is this hearing loss data openly available, sir?
I would. It is not in the web, but it is available with my co-author Kole. So if you don't have her address, I can send her address, and you can write to her. Yes, it is available with her. She herself has collected this data by visiting that institute. Because that institute has all these data available in paper form. They don't have even in digital form. So she has collected those data and she has made them available in digital form and all these things. Because it's a standard thing in most of the institutes, in rather medical institutes in India. So those are especially those in remote places. Yeah. So she herself has digitized this data and she has the data.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, can I share this case? Madam?
Yeah, hello?
Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, I think you can stop sharing. Thank you, Professor Anup Devanji, for the interesting topic. Professor has already suggested a few areas for further study also. And the topic is, it's a problem which we come across very regularly. It's really an interesting topic. Thank you very much, Professor Devanji. Yeah, we will be moving to
It has
the.
been my pleasure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we will be moving to the next speaker. I'm glad to introduce Dr. Mahesh Vishwanath Iyer. He's a PhD in statistics from Temple University, USA. He is a co-founder of Sineflex Solutions. It is a consulting firm focused on enabling and accelerating innovation in the healthcare space. Professor Iyer is also the domain mentor of the BIRAC-funded MedTech Accelerator located at the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, IIIT Hyderabad. Mahesh has over 20 years of experience in research and development in healthcare. He has been responsible for guiding many products through the development life cycle. Before co-founding Sineflex Solutions, Mahesh was at Novartis in various roles, including site head, Biostatistics at Hyderabad, and global head for exploratory safety and statistical analytics. Today, he will be delivering his talk on the topic use of synthetic control arms in clinical trials. I invite Dr. Mahesh Vishwanath Iyer to take over. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Maya. So first of all, thank you all for having me. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, good. And so just a quick update. I know Professor Asha had actually asked me to send my updated bio, which I didn't. So all the stuff that was about Sineflex is a little bit in the past. I'm currently with Parexel, working on a couple of things. I mean, managing the stats and programming group here, but also very surprisingly and very coincidentally, also working in the real world data, real world evidence space, especially in the area of synthetic control arms. So obviously the topic is very, special to me, very close to the work that I'm doing right now. And so happy to share the topic with you. What we will do is, I know we are a little behind time. I also have another meeting to go to immediately after the talk. So I'll try and keep it to, get back to time as much as possible. I might be 5 minutes over, but we'll try and get back to time as quickly as we can. Yeah. So with that, I wanted to see if you had, if you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good. So, so what are synthetic control arms? Yeah, and so it's not something, it's fairly recent in the clinical trial space. So it's not something that a lot of people kind of know about. So we'll talk a little bit about what synthetic control arms are. But I want to start with, why is control so important? And there was an anonymous quote that I read, which I thought was very funny. It said that I'm not really a control freak, but can I show you the right way to do that? So in that sense, we all agree why control is so important. And so what we will do is, maybe I'll spend a few minutes. I do not know how many of you are familiar with generally the drug development life cycle. So maybe I'll spend a few minutes on that. But beyond that, we will talk a little bit more specifically about what are these external control or synthetic control arms, and how do we, and what are some of the statistical challenges there, right? So let's say that the drug development life cycle, as many of us know, or possibly know, starts with, identifying first the disease and then identifying the drugs, which could be, first identifying the target proteins for taking care of the disease, then identifying active leads, getting the drugs made, and then optimizing the molecules, right? So all of that is the purple stage, which is really, the discovery part, discovering a new molecule or a set of candidate drugs, right? And then you see the the blue rectangle in between, which is the set of all the candidate drugs, right? So these are, we don't have one specific drug per se. We probably have maybe 2-3 different versions of the same drug, which are slightly different. And then we have to figure out amongst them, which is the one that we're going to take forward to develop as a medicine, right? And then we move to the orange parts, which is, where we do the trials in humans, right? So we have the preclinical development, which is typically in animals and other things, which is a first chevron. Then we move to the second one, which is phase 1 and phase 2. And then the last one, which is phase 3. And if everything goes well in the orange ones, then at the end, we have another nice blue rectangle, that person doing, and we register the drug and take it to the market. Yeah. So, in each of these phases, especially in the orange part, we have different kinds of designs that we use, right? And especially in the, in these two chevrons where we talk about phase 2 and phase 3, we use what we call placebo-controlled studies, right? So what is the objective of a phase 2 or a phase 3 study? The objective is to show if a treatment works, yeah? And more often than not, they are placebo-controlled, right? And what does that mean by saying placebo-controlled? What it means is that typically what we do is that we will have two treatment arms. Let's say if you have one arm, which is the treatment that you're trying, the investigational product, the drug that you're trying to show works. The second arm is typically a placebo. Yeah. And what is a placebo? Placebo is, sort of an inert substance, what we like to call a sugar pill. Yeah. And the idea is that, and there are many reasons for why you have a placebo control, and we look at them. But, the idea is that you have these two arms, and then any patient, any subject that comes in, they are randomized to either one of the two arms, right? And then they either get the treatment or they get placebo. And once these two, once they're assigned to these treatments, you follow them up for however long is required, whether it's 1 month or 6 months or 2 years, right? And at the end, you want to show if the people on the treatment arm are doing better than people on the placebo arm. Now, why is placebo so important? It is to account for what we typically call a placebo effect. Yeah. And it's not, this is not voodoo science, right? This is actually a well-established effect. So the idea here is that if people are given drug, or even given a placebo, the fact that there is a doctor looking at them, the fact that somebody is paying attention to what their, illness is, the fact that they're given something which they believe will work actually has an effect on the patient and the illness itself. And this is called the placebo effect. It differs, the effect, the magnitude of this effect differs from a disease area to disease area. So in some disease areas like, let's say oncology, cancer, cardiovascular, the placebo effect is not very high or not very long lasting. Whereas in areas such as neuroscience, depression, in those areas, the placebo effect can be very, very strong. Yeah. The second reason for choosing placebo is to account for the body's natural healing ability. So if you're going to give somebody, let's say if somebody's been diagnosed with a particular disease, and then, over time, there is an element of the body naturally trying to heal itself, right? So if people are given only the treatment, then you will not be able to differentiate between the effect of the treatment and the body's natural ability itself. So that's the other reason for placebo control. The third is, a statistical procedure, a phenomena that we all know, which is called regression to the mean. And what this simply means is, let's say that you bring in people with hypertension, high blood pressure. If their blood pressure is 180, whereas the mean blood pressure is around 120 or 130, even if you don't do anything, if you measure them the first time, it'll be 180. If you measure them a week or two later, there is a natural regression to getting back to closer to 120, 130. And so, so this is another phenomena that we all know to be true. And so placebo control helps us to take care of that as well. So the true objective, for a clinical trial in phase 2 or phase 3 is not simply to show if a treatment works, but actually does it work better than placebo or no treatment? Yeah. Now, obviously, there are a lot of questions about placebo. Is it ethical? For example, if somebody is having cancer, can you actually give somebody a sugar pill, for 6 months, right? And is that ethical to do? How will it work? The cancer is going to get worse. So in a lot of times when we say placebo control, it doesn't mean only placebo, right? A lot of cases like oncology and others, it is a placebo control is in addition to standard of care, right? So let us say today, if you are diagnosed with a particular type of tumor, a particular type of cancer, and the standard care essentially is I'm going to give you drug A, B, and C, right? So everybody is given drug A, B, and C. In addition, if there is an experimental arm, let's say drug D, then one group of patients is given ABC plus T, and the other group of patients is given ABC plus placebo. Yeah, and so that's how you still have placebo control. So it's not like you're not treating them at all. You are, but you're trying to show if your drug is better than placebo, given a set of standard of care treatment. Yeah, so that's how this works. Now, what are some of the issues with having placebo control within the study? I mean, we all know it's the best thing to do, but there could be some issues. For example, blinding, right? Supposing the new treatment is something that cannot. So blinding is a process by which people will not know what they're getting, right? So in this case, supposing there's a treatment arm and a placebo arm, and let's say the treatment is an orange colored pill that looks a certain way. Yeah, the placebo will look exactly like the treatment arm. It will also be orange in color. Yeah, except that it will, it won't have the active ingredient. The main drug. It will not have that. That's how we do placebo control, and these are called blinded studies. Now, what if your intervention is something like surgery, right? Very hard to blind, right? I mean, it's not very ethical to, wheel a patient into a surgical room, do an incision, open them up, and then close them up without doing anything, correct? So when you have things like, there are certain cases where blinding becomes very, very hard, and there placebo control can be an issue, right? The second is adherence. So supposing people are being given, let's say, placebo, and supposing the placebo doesn't work very well, for, let's say, majority of the people, and they don't see a benefit. In that case, what starts to happen is people stop taking the drug, even if they're part of a clinical trial. So the adherence drops off. Adherence drops. What real and that's another adherence, right? The third issue, that is very, very beneficial. There is a bunch getting, which is again an issue, right? So if you do, let's say, 1:1 randomization between the treatment and the placebo arm, then generally half of the patients getting any treatment. So we could consider other randomization schema, like, let's say 2:1. Yeah. So for every 3 people, 2 of them get on treatment, 1 gets on placebo. So there's only a few patients that are getting placebo. However, the issue with this is that it actually doesn't help with the overall sample size, because all of us know, the minute you start to actually have unequal sample sizes, the variance goes up, the variance goes up, the sample size goes up, and you will actually see that in most cases, when you actually do 2:1 kind of randomization schemes, there is an overall slight increase in the sample size. Yeah, and this is something that drug companies are not very fond of, to actually have more patients in the study, right? So then the other option is that we have something that we call a historical placebo control. Yeah, so which essentially means that we pick up data from previous studies or registries or electronic medical records and health records from hospitals and so on. Okay, so you're not putting patients on a placebo arm within the study. What you're actually doing is you're looking at past data. Yeah, and you can use this data to get an estimate of what the placebo effect could be, right? And this is what is typically called a synthetic control arm. We recently learned that one of the regulatory authorities in the US, which is the FDA, they don't like this to be called synthetic because, it's not like you're making things up. So they call it an external control arm, right? So you could either call it SCA or ECA, because I had already made the slides, I went ahead and called it simply SCA. Yeah, but you could either call it synthetic control arm or external control arm. Right, and the benefits of SC are quite obvious, right? I mean, it's pretty simple. You're not putting more patients on an inert compound. You don't have to worry about the fact that many patients are not getting the placebo treatment. I mean, not getting the active treatment and so on. So the benefits are quite obvious. However, there are quite a few potential challenges, which is what we will look at, right? One of them is to start to identify which of the previous studies to consider when looking for this historical control. There's a lot of data out there. Which data is relevant to you? Okay. Second is, once you get this data, what is the quality of this data? How complete is it, right? And do you actually have access to this data, right? This is the second. The first two are logistical or operational constraints, right? The third is statistical. how are you going to match patients in the current study with those in previous studies, right? And because the patient population has to be kind of similar for you to match them. So how are you going to do this matching? And then finally around randomization, which we will get to at some point, right? So let's start with issue number one, which is where is the data? Yeah? Where are we going to get this data from? There are many potential sources of data, right? One is, as we said, EMR, EHR, so electronic medical records, electronic health records in hospitals. We can get them from insurance claims. In India, this is still an evolving area, but in Western countries, insurance claims are very, very complete. So people have to get paid for the drugs that they're getting for a particular disease. There is a lot of information captured about the disease itself, right? So insurance claims could be a very good source of data. Registry studies, I know Manipal itself has a registry. I know there are lots of, for example, oncology, cardiovascular registries in India. So registry studies, collect data, based on the standard of care, what people are getting today. So it's a great source for us to go and look at and say, if I didn't have a new treatment, what is the current course of the disease and what is the efficacy of that? So registry studies could be a great place to look at this data, right? And of course, past clinical studies. So if it's a new, let's say, a new medicine for headaches, and you're going to try that against paracetamol, then there are lots of studies done with paracetamol in the past, right? And you could look at that data. The first three settings are non-interventional, okay, where you're not giving them any new drug. The past clinical studies is where paracetamol was given in a clinical trial setting. So that's what we call interventional. But the first three are non-interventional, right? So EMR, EHR is when a patient shows up, what is their current state? Insurance claims is what happened. And registry studies typically are also non-interventional, right? You're just charting the course of the disease and the treatment. And so therefore, first three settings, the expectancy effect is non-existent. Okay, what is the expectancy effect? It is that, when you go into clinical trial and you say, what, I'm going to get a drug and I'm going to get better. That part of the expectancy, and there have been a lot of studies that have shown that this expectancy effect is not insignificant. It's not trivial. So there is an expectancy effect. And so because of that, the first three studies not having that, we might end up underestimating the placebo effect from these past studies, right? So when you're comparing active treatment to placebo, we might end up underestimating that. So that's a problem. The second is that the first three, the process of collecting data is also very different. So, it's not a controlled environment like in clinical trials. You do not know what other medications, which we call concomitant medications, people are using. So all of this could possibly lead to potential biases. Yeah. The other problem with where the data is supposing not the first three, but let's say we do the fourth one, which is we decide to use data from previous clinical studies. How do we now ensure that the patient population is the same? Do they have the same inclusion-exclusion criteria as the current study, right? So for example, a lot of times, we might have inclusion-exclusion criteria, which is to say a patient has to be this stage of a cancer, of a tumor, for them to get enrolled into this particular study. What are the previous studies? They had a different stage of tumor for which they enrolled the patients. Now the two patient populations are different, right? And if they are different, then can you combine these to actually get an estimate of what the placebo is, right? The other one is, what was the standard of care at the time of conducting the clinical studies, right? So for example, in antiretrovirals, they used to have this thing that before they would say that a particular treatment could be given only if the viral load was less than, let's say, 200, whatever units they were, right? Then, a few years later, they came back and they revised that and they said, actually, you could do it even if the viral load was less than 350. And so now the standard of care, from a treatment perspective itself has changed. And if that has changed, then how do we combine the data and make sense of what the results are, right? And finally, how far back can we go? I mean, paracetamol has been around for 30 years. Do we stop in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, last 20 years? From when can we collect the data? How far back can we go? Which will have an impact also on the first three questions, right? Patient population, standard of care, etc., etc. So these are all other issues that start to crop up once we say we're going to actually use data from the previous clinical studies, right? And then the big question is, will we be looking at data only from the same sponsor, right? So the first time aspirin was made by Bayer, right? So if you're going to do an aspirin study, are you going to look only at Bayer studies, or are you going to look at all the other sponsors who also make aspirin, correct? And if you're going to look at all the other sponsors, how do we get access to that data, right? And then finally, the big question is, supposing your placebo arm is a standard of care arm or a placebo arm, right? Is the placebo effect the same in all the past identified studies? And if they are not, then how do we pull all of these things together? Because we know the issues, right? When we pull information from studies which are dissimilar, right, then we can always run into very, very curious statistical phenomena, right, like Simpson's paradox and so on. So if the placebo effects are not the same in all the past studies, then how do we put all of these studies together, right? So these are all the issues with where do we get the data from, correct? Now we get to the issue of how is the data, quality, completeness, right? So how do we assess the quality of the data? If they're not from past clinical studies, then is the data complete enough, right? Are there many variables in the current study which are not collected in the previous data? Do we have access to data, especially when we have EMR, EHR kind of data? Do we explicitly have consent from other patients to use the data to answer these questions, right? Privacy concerns. A lot of places in Europe are very stringent with whether the data can be sent outside of Europe. So if it's only going to be within Europe, how do we put the data together to get the results? And then where do we store the data, what platform, how do we pull things together, and so on and so forth. Each of these data, if you're getting EMR, EHR data versus past clinical trial data, the format's going to be very different. How do we bring them all to a common data model? Yeah. So here is a kind of a checklist. This is an example checklist for what we call regulatory grade real world evidence, which is regulatory grade meaning, stuff that we can actually use to go to a health authority and say, here I've done a clinical trial with a synthetic arm or an external arm, and give us an approval for this drug. For us to be able to do that, these are a few things we have to look at: quality, completeness, transparency. Is it generalizable to the general population? Is it timely? Is it scalable, and so on? Right. So these were a few concerns that we talked about from a logistic operational standpoint. Okay. And now we focus on what are the statistical considerations. Okay. Which is, these are some of the questions that we need to consider when we decide which statistical methodology can we apply to like a synthetic control arm, right? Does the current trial also include a control arm? Okay, so that what we're doing is we're only augmenting data from an external standpoint, or is the external arm the only control arm? So what that means is that, let's say that instead of randomizing from in a different ratio, what we say is I need 100 patients in my treatment arm, okay, and I need 100 patients in the control arm. So instead of getting 100 patients directly as part of this study, what I will do is I'll get only 20 patients as part of this study, and then I will get 80 patients from an external arm, right? Now here, what we're doing is there is a control arm within the study, and then we have external data that augments this, okay, which is obviously the much more desirable way to go, okay. The other option is that I don't enroll anybody into the control arm at all, and all the 100 patients come from an external arm. Right. So this actually makes a big difference in figuring out which statistical methodology to apply. The second is, if you're actually getting data from an external arm or a synthetic arm, then how do I match that data to the current treatment arm? Right. The third question is, do we have external control data on all outcomes or only on some outcomes, right? So let's say that in a cardiovascular study, you might have multiple outcomes, okay, which is hospitalization, stroke, death, 3 outcomes, right? Now, when you're bringing in data from an external arm, do you have data on all these 3 hospitalizations, stroke and death? Or do you have only on 2 of them, for example, stroke or death, and you don't have information on hospitalization, or you only have information on one, which is death. Yeah. So do you have data on all the outcomes or only some? And if you have data on all the outcomes, when you run your analysis, is the data actually consistent across all the outcomes? And this becomes another important consideration as well when deciding the statistical methodologies, right? So we will go into a little bit of depth into each one. Okay, so let's start by addressing the first question, yeah, which is the outcome that is being measured in the current clinical trial the same as the outcome being measured in previous? Yeah. So which means that right now I'm looking at, let us say, I want to figure out, the rate of or the proportion of people having a stroke or hospitalization or death, right? And let's say that is something very similar to what was done in the previous studies, okay, with one or two small differences. So if the answer is very close, then what we can do is we can use this concept called estimans to ensure that the outcome definition is consistent. Okay, and so what is an estimand? ICH is the International Committee on Harmonization, and what they have done is they have defined what an estimand is. An estimand is something that's gaining a lot of traction in clinical trials these days. It is a description of the treatment effect which is associated with the clinical trial objective, right? So it is more specifically, it measures what the outcomes would be in the same patients under different treatment conditions being compared. So what it's saying is, hypothetically, if patient 1 gets treatment A, what would their outcome be? And if the same patient 1 were to get treatment B, then what would their outcome be? Now, obviously, this is not possible, right? Because in large studies, you're not giving 2 treatments to the same patient. You're only doing that in small crossover studies, right? So here, what you're saying is that if I were to give the same treatment, to the same patient, if I were to give different treatments, I want to compare what the effect is. So you want to try and get these patients to be as similar as possible, right? That's the idea. So what are the characteristics of an estimate? There are 4 characteristics as defined. One is, how do you define the targeted study population? Second is the endpoint of interest. Third is details of any intercurrent events. Intercurrent events are other competing events that happen. So we had a talk on competing events or something similar. What will happen if a patient is hospitalized? What happens if a patient gets an adverse event? What happens if a patient drops out of the study, right? How do you deal with those patients? So those are the intercurrent events. And then finally, what is the population level summary of the variable of interest? Okay, so let's take an example. Let's say that my target population is obese patients, okay? My endpoint of interest is, in general, is quality of life, okay? Details of intercurrent events is, how would I deal with missing data? If, a patient had diabetes, if an obese patient, had an onset of diabetes while the study was ongoing and the patient drops out, then how do I deal with that? If the patient has a very severe adverse events and drops out, how do I deal with that? If the patient, has a, let's say, COVID-19 type of a disruption and stops coming to the study, then how will I deal with that? If a patient discontinues early for any other reason, how will I deal with that? So, I have to define all of these. And then finally, my variable of interest is the difference between the week 52 SF36 mean change of treatment and control. Yeah. So an estimand is not just a statement; it's a framework that takes care of all of these things. So we can actually define estimands if the outcomes are similar between the current study and past studies, and in that case we can start to look at this. Yeah. So now the next question is, are we looking to augment an existing control, or is the SEAM the only control? Yeah. Obviously, it's better to have some subjects in the current study also in the control arm and use the SEA to augment it. Yeah, and this helps to validate the data and so on and so forth, right? It also helps us in some of the more advanced methods when you look at Bayesian mixed model approaches and so on. Okay. However, this may not always be possible because of ethical reasons, because it's infeasible and so on. Right. So then we say that we are now having to look at getting an external control arm, whether it is to augment or to it be the solo arm. How can we get this data, and how can we now compare it and add it to the current study? Okay, in the simplest case, if the external data completely matches with the current clinical trial data, okay, and this could happen in very, very rare circumstances, like for example, a particular sponsor has done 1 or 2 studies, okay, where they have used the same placebo arm. Okay, now they're doing a third study for a different endpoint, but the placebo arm is the same. Yeah. So now you have identical everything, right? And if that's the case, you could simply take the previous arm, you could take any summary measure that you want, mean, time to event, whatever that may be, and compare it with the treatment arm. Yeah. So obviously this is the easiest approach, but it's also the most unlikely. It's very rare that this happens. So then what you have to do is you have to create an external arm and somehow be able to match the data, right? So if the external data is dissimilar, then somehow you have to think about matching it so that we address the imbalance. So how do we do that? Okay, so we could use methods such as multivariate regression, we could use propensity scoring and so on. So we'll talk a little bit about each of these, right? So what are the advantages? If we can identify all the potentially significant explanatory variables, okay, then these methods adjust the imbalance very well. They are quite easy to perform and interpret, and you typically get conclusions which is valid, especially the data is large, right? What are some of the issues? The issues is that depending on the number magnitude of tuning, and tuning here I'm talking I want to also look in the control arm for somebody who is male and somebody whose performance score is 2, for example. But should I insist on them being 54? Or is it okay for them to be 53 or 55? Is it okay for them to be 50 or 60? So that is the tuning. How close do you want the matching to be between the folks in the treatment arm and folks in the external arm? Yeah. And that, if the magnitude of tuning, if the tuning is very, very conservative, you want the data to be as closely matched as possible, then obviously statistically it's better. But then data shrinks a lot. So if you start with 1,000 patients and you're looking for male 54 with a performance status of 2, you may only have patients only, correct? And so the idea is that, but if you say any between 50 and 60, then you may have 300 patients. So what I'm trying to get at is that depending on how conservative you want the tuning to be, data shrinking is a problem. Yeah, and there have been a lot of examples where doing something like this had led to some counterintuitive findings, but we won't get into the details of that, right? And then between multivariate, propensity score, and all the other kinds of similar methods, there is no uniform best approach. In a way, you have to kind of figure out what works for you. Just to talk a little bit more about propensity scores versus multivariate regression, propensity scores between the two, generally propensity scores are preferred because one, it can actually accommodate a larger number of both linear and non-linear relationships, right? Where multivariate regression, has a little bit of difficulty with some of the more non-linear relationships. The other problem with regression is that they also tend to extrapolate in regions where there is a non-overlap of populations. Okay, so for example, let us say that in one trial we are looking at an inclusion criteria of HbA1c of, let's say, less than or equal to 7.5. And in another study, we are looking at less than or equal to 9. Yeah. Now, there is this part between 7.5 and 9, which there is a non-overlap of the populations. What a regression model would do is it would tend to extrapolate in this area as well, whereas a propensity score would not, right? So therefore, for these kind of reasons, it's probably better when we do matching for SCA, we tend to go a little bit more with propensity scores than with multivariate regression, right? However, it is still important that we try and identify as many predictors as possible upfront, right? I'm going to briefly talk about a couple of other things, which is a Bayesian approach, right? There are some complex adjustment and weighting approaches, apart from the multivariate regressions and the propensity scores. For example, we could use a Bayesian mixed model approach with commensurate power priors, and especially when you have external data coming from different sources, when you have it coming from registries, biobanks, EMR, EHR, right? Then you want to be able to weight data differently depending on where you find the most amount of matching populations, right? And so when you want to be able to do that kind of weighting for the external data sources, then a Bayesian approach actually works quite well. You can apply a flexible degree of weight to the different data sources. So the idea then is that once you're able to do this, you're able to get all the external data coming from studies that are reasonably similar. Then they can be translated into a prior, and then once they're translated into a prior, then you can combine it with the current data, and then go ahead with your analysis, right? And so this is the Bayesian approach, right? The main concern is that this approach tends to be a little complicated, and there are all the standard things about subjectivity of the priors and so on and so forth. So it's not something which is very widely used, but when you have to put together quite disparate sources of data, then this might be the only approach you have. Some of the other approaches is, of course, if you want to identify a homogeneous group of patients from external sources, we can go into what we are used to using now in the data sciences space. So we use exploratory options such as random forests, neural networks, cluster analyses. All of these approaches would identify a homogeneous subpopulation. And once you're able to do that, then you can go ahead, put these together, then go ahead, apply priors, use the Bayesian. So, you can mix and match all these different ways of looking at this data. And you can really go crazy. You can go as creative as you want. The only couple of concerns with some of these approaches is that they are predominantly exploratory, okay, and very heavily dependent on the input data. So once you do some of these approaches to identify, the homogeneous mix, you have to do another kind of, new methods, new analyses or new studies to confirm what you find from here. So that's, in that sense, it's not very helpful. The other is the interpretability, as we all know, with some of these bias, then it's hard for us to reproduce, so to speak. So those are a couple of issues. Microsimulation, in specific cases where the non-external data source, there are quite a few of them, but they but then move to cancer, degeneration, and so on. And you have many studies as stages of the disease, but don't have too many studies that cover the entire length or trajectory of how this happens. Right? So you look at these micro simulations, which are essentially Markov models, but here your unit of simulation is not an entire population, but an individual. So you take an individual and then you simulate the course of disease for this particular individual. And you can do this both for the external arm, but also for the control arm when you don't have that level of longevity for the control arm, right? And what this allows you to do is it actually allows you to simulate these long-term outcomes while accounting for some of these complex interactions between the patient characteristics, right? And that's what the micro simulations allows you to do. So it's a very exciting area, a lot of, we have seen over the years that randomization is really as good as we expect it to be. But unfortunately, external control arms, synthetic control arms, they violate this major principle, right? And so there can really be nothing as good as being able to randomize subjects into a control arm within a study. That's obviously the best, and no amount of statistical artistry that we can do can replace this simple, however, most effective tool. So I just wanted to put this out in the end, saying that when possible, you still want to use the randomization and so on. So in conclusion, SEA, ECA, it can be very useful, especially in situations where it's either unethical or infeasible to have a control arm within the study, or in situations such as where, for example, Roche did with alectinib. They actually did the study for so much about the efficacy of the treatment itself. You were much more concerned about what is really the magnitude of effect for you to use it appropriately. So situations are definitely control. There is an incredible amount of data with any new, what they say is, when you have a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail, right? So similarly, it's not the panacea. It's it's not the cure-all that we have. So we need to proceed with caution, considering all the potential challenges. And with that, I want to stop and maybe have a few minutes for any questions.
Yes, over to the participants. Any questions? Any questions?
Hi, Mahesh. Asha here.
Hi, Asha.
Thank you for this exciting talk, because I think a lot of challenges have been posed by you, and I think good food for thought for both theoreticians as well as applied people. Just one query is, like, suppose we are going in for an evidence synthesis using the, SEA. What should, am I audible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So when we are looking for evidence synthesis, and suppose I intend to even include the SEA trials, so what would be the quality checks that would be considered?
Correct. So I think what I had mentioned, right? There are many checklists that are available on the internet, right? The one that I had put up was something, which was put up by somebody who used to be at Flatiron Health and then eventually went and joined the US FDA, right? So they basically look at 6 different things. One is around quality of the data itself, right? Like, in terms of, how often was it collected, how much missingness there is, and so on and so forth. The second is around completeness of the data itself, are all the fields being captured? Like, one of our biggest things that we have found with looking at EMR, EHR data in India hospitals is that the completeness is horrendous. Yeah. And this, right? When I go to a hospital, they may have, the form will have 25 questions because I'm in a hurry and they're in a hurry to get me out. They'll ask me 5 questions, and then they let me go, right? And all the other 20 questions are blank. And so completeness is an issue and so on. So if you're able to pull, and so if you can go through the checklist and mark things off to say where, how complete this data is, how relevant is that patient population, how similar is it to, synthesizing, when you're putting together different types of patient populations and so on. If you can bring those kinds of, if you can go through one of those checklists, I think, it'll be very easy to mark and say whether you should include a particular external source or not.
Okay. Because the heterogeneity is going to be huge.
Correct. And for some of the evidence synthesis, we want that because we want that to be generalized. Right. We don't want it to be very specific to a particular, so clinical trials are very different. You want to estimate only the treatment effect and nothing else, right?
Correct.
Whereas, in evidence synthesis, most of the time you're looking at saying, okay, in the real population, how is it going to be doing? Correct?
Right.
And so there you want that level of heterogeneity. So that's okay. The issue is only about putting together apples and oranges. That's the only problem.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh Iyer, for briefly giving a gist of what do we mean by the synthetic control arm and the issues to be taken care of, as well as the methods to address these issues. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh.